Okay, in Luke 23, verse 13, Pilate, when he had called together the chief priests and the rulers and the people, said unto them, You have brought this man unto me as one that perverts the people. And behold, I, having examined him before you, have found no fault in this man, touching these things whereof you accuse him. No, nor yet Herod, for I sent you to him, and lo, nothing worthy of death is done unto him. And I will therefore chastise him and release him. For of necessity he must release one unto them at the feast. And they cried out all at once, saying, Away with this man, and release unto us Barabbas, who for a certain sedition made in the city, and for murder was cast into prison. Pilate, therefore, willing to release Yeshua, spoke again to them, but they cried, saying, Crucify him, crucify him. And he said unto them the third time, Why? What evil has he done? I have found no cause of death in him. I will therefore chastise him and let him go. And they were instant with loud voices, requiring that he might be crucified. And the voices of them and of the chief priests prevailed. And Pilate gave sentence that it should be as they required. A poet once wrote, Of all the words of tongue or pen, the saddest of these it might have been. If that's true, then one of the most tragic words in human language must be the word almost. Almost speaks of aborted opportunities and missed chances. And I'm sure that as long as this world exists, almost will dot the pages of human history. I almost climbed the mountain. We almost reached our goal. I almost closed the deal. We almost got there in time. We all had those almost experiences. I suppose that the most infamous almost in history would have been Pilate, because he almost released Yeshua. He almost lowered the gavel and said, Not guilty. He almost said, I dismiss all charges because this man is innocent. He almost set him free. What a change that would have made in our perception of Pilate. We might even be calling him St. Pilate today. He almost did it, but he didn't. Yet he could have. That is his tragedy. He had the authority to do it. He wore the signet ring that said he had the power to do it. All he had to do was speak in the word decisively, and Yeshua would have been set free. And he did it almost. Verse 23 says, But with loud shouts they insistently demanded that he be put to the stake, and their shouts prevailed. So Pilate decided to grant their demand. He listened to their voices. We could even say, I suppose, that he listened to the voices of evil, to the voice of Satan. We've heard the voices too. Voices saying, Go ahead, do it. No one's ever going to know. Or just one little drink won't hurt. Satan beckons unto us into paths that we should not go. But Pilate didn't have to listen to those voices. There were other voices he could have listened to. He could have listened to his wife, who sent a note that said, Don't have anything to do with that innocent man, for I have suffered a great deal today in a dream because of him. You find this in Matthew 27, verse 19. When he was set down on the judgment seat, his wife sent unto him, saying, Have thou nothing to do with the just man, for I have suffered many things this day in a dream because of him. He could have listened to her voice. He almost did. He could have listened to his own voice. Pilate was no dummy. He knew what was going on. He knew that Ananias and Caiaphas, the chief priest, were corrupt and greedy. He knew they were lying about Yeshua. He could have listened to his own voice, to reason, common sense. He almost did. But he didn't. Pilate is not the only one who has played the game of almost. Some of us have played that game also. I almost made the decision today to be baptized, perhaps. Or I almost said, "Here I am, Lord, use me." But the Bible very clearly teaches us that there are no almost with Yahweh. There is no almost in the kingdom of Yahweh. No almost place where we can go. It's either the kingdom of heaven or death. And Pilate's tragedy could be our tragedy too. So when we open the Bible and we begin to read the story of Yeshua, we read about being placed on the stake. Even though Pilate came that close to freeing Yeshua, he didn't. So as we view that scene, we see soldiers going about their task. They were used to putting people on the stake. They had done it many times before. First, they laid the stake down on the ground. Then they placed Yeshua and the two thieves upon them, driving sharp spikes through their hands and feet. Then they hoisted the rough wooden stakes into the air and dropped them into the holes that had held the stakes before. And then they were done. Yeshua's dying. You would think that by now Annas and Caiaphas would have been satisfied, but there was something about the sign placed on the stake that angered them. It read Yeshua, King of the Jews. Once again, they stormed into the presence of Pilate. And we could only wish that Pilate had as firm a decision and decisive earlier as he shows himself to now. For when they came rushing into his presence, protesting the wording of the sign, Pilate says, "That's enough. What I have written, I have written. The sign stays. Yeshua, King of the Jews." So there he hangs between heaven and earth. Looking through tears and blood, he could see the faces of the people who had gathered around him. It was an unusually large crowd. Perhaps there was no football game there or soccer matches to watch it that day. So they went to watch an execution. And as that view of the scene and look at the faces, we look for friendly faces. Someone we might recognize. Where was Peter? Surely Peter would have shown up, but Peter is nowhere to be seen. Oh, how about James, Andrew, Bartholomew? The soldiers gathered underneath the stake and began throwing dice, gambling for his robe. And every time we look at those soldiers, we see a little bit of ourselves, don't we? Sometimes we're so close to the stake, and yet so far away. They were right there, right next to the blood that was dropping on the ground. They could hear the cries of pain. They could look up any time they wished to see Yeshua dying there. And yet their minds were someplace else. They were rolling dice to see who would get his robe. And listen, Yeshua's praying, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. Father, forgive the soldiers who drove the nails into my hands. Forgive Pilate, who found me innocent but sentenced me to die anyways. Forgive Annas and Caiaphas and the Sanhedrin and all the rest. Father, forgive the believers who will meet at the church in Panama City, Florida, because their sins nailed me here too. Yes, Father, forgive them all." I don't know if we could ever pray that kind of prayer. Sometimes we have a hard time getting along with our neighbors. Sometimes we have a hard time forgiving our spouses or our children or even our brothers and sisters. But yet Yeshua taught us to pray. Forgive us our sins as we forgive those who sin against us. The gospel tells us that Yeshua spoke 7 times on the stake. 3 times he spoke before the darkness came. Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. Then he turns to one of the thieves and said, you shall be with me in paradise. He also looked at Mary, his mother, and John, the apostle, and said, woman, behold your son, and son, behold your mother. Suddenly darkness covers the earth. The wind started to blow. Lightning and thunder rolled across the sky. And even the ground began to shake. And then the storm was at its height. Yeshua cried out, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani. And those who stood at the distance could barely hear his words. Some said, maybe he calls for Elijah. Let's see if Elijah comes. But those who were closest heard what he said. Ma'el, why have you forsaken me? At that moment in time, the sins of the world, your sins and mine, caused Yahweh our Father to turn his face from his Son. Then the darkness left, and 3 more cries came from his lips. I thirst. It is finished. And Father, into your hands I commend my spirit. Then it's all over. The greatest victory of all had been won. On a hill that looked like a skull outside of Jerusalem, everything that Yahweh had worked for and planned was finally realized in the death and burial and ultimate resurrection of Yeshua. You know, there's probably nothing more consistent about life than its inconsistencies. Life is like tossed salads, isn't it? You stick in your fork and you never know for sure what you're going to get. Like a roller coaster. It's ups and downs, twists and turns. You never really know what will happen next. But if there is one very strong message that comes to us from Calvary, it is that Yahweh is able to weave it all together. He can take all the inconsistencies, all the fragments and pieces of our life, and weave them together into a beautiful tapestry, just as he planned. That is the message we need to hear. Because one day the sun shines and the next it rains. One day we think everything's going our way and the next our world comes crashing down around us. One moment we are young and healthy and the next the doctor tells us that he has some bad news for us. Yet Yeshua is saying it really doesn't matter. Because all of you have really committed yourselves to me will find righteousness and goodness and victory, not defeat. You will find that your despair is replaced with eternal hope, because that is the message of Calvary. So in light of all that, our prayer ought to be, O Yahweh, Almighty Elohim, help us never ever to look at the stake and see the one who died there without feeling a tear on our cheek or feeling our hearts strangely moved and broken. Let us never come here, Yahweh, and just casually look at it and almost be moved by it, but turn away from it and go on with life as usual. You see, the ultimate tragedy in every worship service is that there are people who are almost ready to make a decision. There are people who stand right on the brink of saying, I surrender all and I'm going to follow Yeshua, and they almost do it. Others are just like those soldiers casting dice at the feet of Yeshua. They're so engrossed in what they're doing that they never look up and let the message sink in and make a change in their lives. They're so near and yet so far. So once again, praying that if you're almost there, you won't turn away like Caiaphas and Annas and Pilate and the soldiers, is that you will look and see and listen and make that decision. You don't want to be almost in the kingdom. You want to be in the kingdom. Yeah, we bless.